All right, guys. So now let's look at our next part, which is going to be focused on contracting officers. And I don't have as many points for this one, but the main takeaway from the points I am going to share, the lessons learned, is I want to focus on setting the right expectations, because I think a lot of new GovCons, for instance, put contracting officers on a pedestal. And it's just, what they don't know sort of thing. And they also have kind of the wrong expectations in terms of the way they would like certain things to be. So I'll kind of dive into these lessons so that I can expand on by what I mean by this. So number 35, contracting is not as responsive as you would like them to be. And if you've been in the space for even a little bit, boy, don't you know that's the truth. It can be challenging to get them to pick up the phone, even to get an email response, depending on what it's about and when. Can seem like a challenge. And should it be that way? I don't think so. It's honestly one of the biggest plights that I have in this space, is that I wish contracting was way more responsive than they are. Can we control them? Is there much we can do about it? No, we can only control ourselves. And so that means it's up to us to, whether it's sending an email, being, short and sweet so that, we increase the chances of getting a response if possible. We can't always be short and sweet with it, and we shouldn't have to always be either. If we have a lot of questions or we have a need, that's just how it is sometimes. But then also, whether it's requesting debriefs, right? This is a big complaint of just contracting not doing it or not even responding back. Contracting not letting other bidders know that the award was made and that they didn't win. Some are nice when they do that, but they don't all do that. And then submitting like RFIs, questions. It's like, I've done it. I've done it a lot, where I submit a question for a solicitation, don't even get a response. It's like, okay, all questions are supposed to be addressed. As long as it was submitted before the Q&A deadline, it's supposed to be addressed because it can affect the outcome. So these things are not good. Government contracting it's not a perfect industry. It certainly has its faults, and it has quite a few of them, to be honest. But what big marketplace industry doesn't? So we're not coming into government contracting thinking that things are going to be perfect, and we're not putting contracting as a pedestal, like I said. And we're going to go in knowing, for example, with responsiveness, that we're probably going to have to do a lot of follow-ups with contracting. So number 36, even contracting often does not understand the regulations. This one, it kind of pisses me off, to be honest. Especially, just something that hits really close to home is like the legal middleman regulations, understanding, limitations on subcontracting, what it means to work with a similarly situated entity, that actually counts as self-performance, right? We talk a lot about it in the program. You're not able to further subcontract that work out without that going towards your minimum percentage that you have to complete. But in all other instances concerned, you're completing 100% of it because the money's going, right, where it's supposed to go. For example, if it's woman-owned small business, a minimum amount of the money has to be going to small businesses if it's a contract that's bound by limitations on subcontracting, which also means not all contracts are bound by limitations on subcontracting. You have to consider what the simplified acquisition threshold is. You have to consider the set aside, right? If it's a full, open, unrestricted. All of these factors contribute to if this is even applying or not. And everything I'm speaking to are regulations or languages within the regulations, and even contracting doesn't get that, to the point that some of them will butt back and say, oh no, that's a pass-through scheme. You can't do that. You have to do, your company has to do some of the work, right? And it's just not the case. It's not the way the SBA words it. It's not the way it's written in the electronic, or in the Federal Register rather, within the little SBA notes, with the creation of these governing rules, right? It's just not the case, and they don't know that. Get the book if you want to learn about it. That's why I wrote the LMM book. So that, and that's just one example, but there's a number of other regulations that contracting doesn't fully understand, because guess what? They're just people too, but because they're people, they should be open to knowing that they make mistakes and that they don't know everything. And unfortunately, a lot of them are on a power trip. Yes, I'll say it. A lot of them are on a power trip, and that's why a lot of new GovCons put them on a pedestal, because they put themselves on a pedestal. They're not God. They don't know everything. And even their bosses, the chief contracting officers, they don't know everything either. They don't. It's why there's so many protests. It's why there's a lot of things going on in the industry that shouldn't be going on, right? Some of you may know what I mean by that. It's a huge grievance. It's like the hugest grievance. But that has got to be an expectation, because we're not coming in and changing things. We're knowing that, it's part of the beast, it's part of the animal. And so we have to play in the environment that we have to play with, that we can't control. Number 37, have everything in writing. This kind of really goes hand in hand with what we're discussing here. Is you need to cover your butt as much as you can. Be able to point to the thing, whether that's meaning like taking meeting minutes for every single meeting, dispersing those even if the contracting officer was not present. Whether it's like something happened on the site, you want to document that like ASAP, especially if it's like a safety concern. You want to have that stuff written up. So documentation, have it in writing, is super important. Number 38, contracting. At the end of the day, they just have a job to do, just like everybody else. And the main theme with this, with setting the right expectations for contracting officers, is knowing that they're humans too. And so with that, they just have a job to do at the end of the day. So once you understand, they're just doing a job, right? And what is their job? Okay, they're really a matchmaker. How are they a matchmaker? Okay, contracting officer, and then there's an end user. There's a PM. There's somebody within the agency that needs this thing, right? Because they're going to use it, whether it's a service or a product or whatever, or it's a building, like it's construction, like all these different things that are being procured. Someone or someones are going to be using it. So that person or that group is coming to contracting saying, hey, we need this. We need more of this, or this is new. We need one of these. We need this, or this is old. We need to, refresh it, like whatever, apply it to all things. So this is what we need. So they're going to go write up the contracts, right? Not contracting, the contracting end users, PMs, engineers, you name it, maybe even cores in some instances. They're going to write up a statement of work, the technical stuff of what's needing. And then contracting is going to say, cool, thanks. And then contracting is going to do the whole contracting side of thing of okay, this is what we need from offers. These are regulations that are going to apply. That's what it's their job to know, right? And then they're going to go solicit and market it out to industry, which then is us, prime contractors, and say, hey, anybody, interested in this? And they're going to take it through, the 4 stages of every bid, right? Source of sought, pre-sale, solicitation, and award. I think we'll get to that at a future point. So I won't go into the 4 stages just yet, but they're going to take that through that cycle, and then hopefully find the best single or multiple award ease to do the work that the initial end user needed done. So that's the cycle, right? So at the end of the day, they just have a job to do, and that's their role, being that kind of middleman matchmaker on their end between us and the end user. Number 39, I put contracting your people too with families and lives of their own. And that's basically, sounds like I'm saying the same thing, but I kind of mean that from a relationship building thing. Looking at it through a BD lens, you start to establish a rapport over time. You get to know about their lives. You get to know about what they have going on, and it's kind of like sales. It kind of works. So when you get your foot in the door, like we talked about, you start to spider web out. You start to develop relationships on a deeper level, if you will. You start to find that they're just, again, people too. And it's another facet of being human, is having families and lives of their own. then they also get to see you as a human, and you get to see each other for who you really are. And for some instances, that can be favorable to you, depending on the modes and methods of how procurements can come out of that, awards can come out of relationships. And of course, you're still going to have to jump through all the hoops and keep everything like by the book. Like I said, you have to learn how to bid. You have to learn how to, submit the paperwork, do it properly, how to price, write a proposal, all that stuff. And you never get away from it. But once you get some of the fundamentals under your belt, things do happen. And relationship building and development is a thing, but it is not a substitute for the most important thing. But when you get those fundamentals down, then you can start tacking on some of these other things. And that's where things like this come in useful. Number 40, the government is slow. Set expectations accordingly. We talked about this with the subs, right? But also for yourself. I mean, it's slow, it's big, it's clunky. Calm down a little bit. Don't just, I've already said it. Don't be too impatient, okay? Think in terms of months, not weeks, right? Think in weeks, not days. If you approach government contracting in this way, and contracting officers, you're going to be going more with their flow, and you want to march to their beat, because you're not going to get them to march to your beat. So learn to march to their beat. You're going to be playing more closely to the new rules versus the old rules of the commercial space. It's just, when in Rome, right? Like if you're gonna be here a while, you got to start acting like a government contractor, which means a little bit about how the government works. And, like we'll talk about it too, but like fourth quarter, super busy. Like you should be working nights and weekends. That's like being an accountant and saying, I want to have a steady schedule, so I'm not going to work any extra hours during tax season. What? You're crazy. No, you have to act and behave like an accountant would during that season. Like you should be super busy. It's going to make up for, other slower times of the year. So in many of the capacities, your business should be mirroring the way that the government is operating. And if it's more of a slow and steady type thing, you should have that built into your operations as well. And then it's not always slow and steady, but the government's responsiveness and things are slow. Number 41, triple check your work as well as contractings. It's happened to me a number of times where contracting, for example, I will win a contract and then contracting will send me the finalized award and then they miss the decimal place or they miss the comma. Commas are big, Adding or subtracting a zero at the end of a number makes a really big difference. They make those mistakes. Why? Because they're people, okay? And they don't have people double checking their work. I can promise you that. The mistakes I've seen are crazy. So triple check your work for the same reasons, like having, you have to do a full blown like red team, but just having a fresh set of eyes and maybe like a rubric, right? Or a compliance matrix or something to compare what's being asked for with what's being provided, right? Something, and give it to somebody who hasn't seen it and let them go through your proposal. They could catch like the silliest details that you just overlooked because you're so focused on the more complicated things, you miss the simple things. Things like this can be caught, and it's very often the silly details, the small details, that's where the mistakes are occurring. And just having a simple check like that can help to avoid that. Number 42, contracting will copy and paste old contracts. If you are in the space long enough to see, sometimes you may see a statement of work for an entirely different job in there. And you're trying to actually, you're actually trying to make sense of it. You're like, oh, well, really? I guess I could kind of see that. And it's like mowing for a laundry contract or something like that. You're like, really? I guess their clothes could get dirty. Like not seriously, but you could try to rationalize it because you give them the benefit of the doubt, knowing that I think they're using a wrong. they didn't fully sanitize this. They forgot to take this thing out. Happens all the time. Don't always assume that it's you. Contracting makes their fair share of mistakes because they're human, setting the right expectations. So knowing that, we're not going to put 100% of the burden and responsibility on us if we think something looks really off. They may have just made a mistake. And so send it in. Request the clarification, ask the question, and they may, very often we'll amend the contract, add the proper statement of work, what have you. Number 43, basically the same thing. Contracting does get it wrong often. Sometimes they'll have to just recompete the entire contract. They'll just pull it off because all the bidders for the solicitation, they're all baffled. And maybe you've seen it like on sam.gov where there's like 5 or 6 rounds of Q&A of questions being posted. And it's like when there's that many questions, it's like, okay, something is just not clear. Things are being looked at from 2 different ways. Everybody's not on the same page. So we have to like redo this thing. And contracting hates to do that. And so does industry because of everybody's time that's been invested into it. But I know it sounds like I'm coming down on contracting, and for some things I do, like with responsiveness or not understanding the regulations, I come down on those. But because they are human, they make mistakes all the time. They're not, contracting officer is not an expert in your particular field or fields, right, or industries, whatever. They're not, right? They're the expert in the paperwork, in the process. They're experts in procurement, matchmaking, making the deal happen. That's what their expertise and their warrant and their license and their testing is for. It's not about every individual field. That's why they rely on their end users, because their end users are supposed to be the experts, right? And then contracting also shops it around and does their own market research on top of that. But there's just so many things that are being bought. Like some things are going to be missed. They're going to be wrong. You may have like a way better idea that costs half as much. Cool, we'll talk about it. Submit an alternate proposal. Like you'll probably win. Like they just missed it. For those reasons, human reasons, not intentional per se, or laziness, just due to the vast size and all the different things that exist. I mean, just look at NAICS codes and PSC codes. Due to all of that, there's going to be gaps. So once again, it's like, don't put it all on you just because you're hard on yourself because you're new and you don't feel like you know anything. You actually know more than you think. And a lot of this stuff is rather intuitive. And if something's just feeling really out of whack, once again, it might not be you, it might be them because they do get it wrong. So number 44, last one for contracting officers. This is like a marriage. So I know it seems that contracting officers, just contracting in general, is very kind of like cold and non-responsive for all those reasons that I just went through. And that's very worrisome because new bidders are like, who haven't won a contract yet, they're like, man, this is how it's going to be. Like, I'm afraid to even do this government contracting thing because like once I win, I feel like I'm going to have so many more questions and I feel like nobody's going to be on my team. It goes from like a black and white feel to color, like pre and post award, because once you get the award, once you're awarded and they select you, now they're kind of like in a marriage with you. I mean, yeah, there can be a divorce, but nobody wants that. So it's like their success is tied to your success. So all of a sudden they're a lot more responsive, a lot more helpful. There's more POCs to talk to on the inside all of a sudden. And it's quite helpful, right? There's start of work meetings. There's a lot more regular communications, and it's just between you and them. So it's actually as helpful. Obviously, they can't do that with everybody who's just trying to submit bids, because who's got time for that? But when it's awarded and you're in this partnership, when you're in this marriage, things do change, and I don't think that's spoken about enough. So for those of you who have that anxiety about like, okay, when I'm going to have to know how to do all this stuff. No, they're going to help you. Like they're going to help you with invoicing. They're going to help you if like there's other stuff going on the base and you need to coordinate. You're going to have people kind of on your side, because if you fail, they all fail, and then someone's going to get fired. Not necessarily literally, but it's going to look bad on them. So it's literally their job to empower you to do yours. And I'm speaking in generalities. Of course, there's nightmare situations with everything. I can hear some people saying, "Well, that didn't happen on mine." Okay, well, if you do enough contracts, you'll realize that this is more the norm than nightmare situations. Nightmare situations are not the norm. Okay, and the way you avoid those is through constant communication. The more communication, the better. That's how you avoid things. That way, when something comes up, it's dealt with, and contracting doesn't have to worry about like, are you going to show up to do your job or not? It's very much, you have trust, you have a level of faith after a while, and you can learn to count on one another. And that humanity very much shows itself once the award comes in. So I hope that's helpful, and let's go ahead and look at the next part.